back to another week of Behind the Lens. I'm Debbie Elias, film critic, creator, and host of Behind the Lens, where we go behind the lens and below the line with the movers and shakers, the film and TV makers, those producers, directors, writers, actors, cinematographers, production designers, costume designers, film editors, sound mixers, sound designers, VFX gurus, composers, stuntmen, and more. And you all know how much I love chatting about the nuts and bolts of the craft. So we're not quite 2 weeks into the new year. Been an interesting year so far on multiple fronts. Award season is in full swing, or as I like to call it, the press selfies with celebrities season. Critics' Choice, Astor Awards, Golden Globes are in the can, as are plenty of selfie celebrity picks, with undoubtedly more to come as we move through the next 3 months until the Oscars on March 15th. Now, for those of you unaware, and this is one of my favorite days of the year, March 15th is the Ides of March, and we all know how that turned out for Julius Caesar. Interesting, the Oscars will be on the same day. But I digress. Getting back to this week and BTL, how many of you went to the theater and saw Greenland 2, Migration? You heard director Ric Waugh talk about it with me on last week's show. If you haven't seen it yet, get to the theater and check it out. It's well worth the price of admission and delivers on all fronts, from action to emotion, tears to screams and sweaty palms. I saw it back in December before I spoke with Rick, and then I saw it in the theater again this weekend. And I loved it even more the second time around. And chances are I'll probably go see it a third time. My full interview with Rick, I've got a written feature up on the website, behindthelensonline.net. My review is out. It's on Rotten Tomatoes. It's on IMDb. It's on the website. Check out the review. And, of course, if you missed Monday's show, every show for the past, now going into our 12th year, is up on the website on behindthelensonline.net. And many of the shows for the first several years actually were videoed, and the videos are up on our YouTube channel. And for the past year, I've been doing everything as a pre-recorded podcast, and all of that is up on our YouTube channel. So you can always, anything you miss on Mondays at 11 o'clock in Pacific time or 2 o'clock East Coast time, you can listen to your heart's content anytime you want. Now, on to today's show. It's another emotional film this week, as I'm talking with writer, director, and actor STEVEN GRAYHM about his latest film, Sheepdog, which is one of the most important and powerful films you will see this year. There have been a number of films over the years, especially since all of the Middle East conflicts, that address PTSD or some form of it. Some of those films work, while others fall flat and are formulaic and unaffecting. Those of you who have been following the show or following my reviews for the past 44 years know how much coverage that I do give to films that talk about our military and our military veterans, especially those dealing with the hardships that come with PTSD. It's something that's very dear to my heart, in large part due to many veterans that I personally know from the Vietnam era, as well as from the Middle East altercations. But one of the best documentaries that has been done over the past decade about PTSD and veterans is That Which I Love Destroys Me, which is directed by Ric Waugh. Another emotional, no-holds-barred narrative film is Bloodstripe by director Remy Auberjonois. I can never get Remy's last name said right. Auberjonois. His father, Rene, is one of the stars of the film, as is his wife, Kate Nolan. That film focuses on a female combat veteran and her battle with vigorous PTSD. Another interesting perspective comes from 2017's MEAGAN LEAVEY, directed by Gabriela Cowperthwaite, which focuses on a Marine corporal and her canine combat companion, and not only her fight to adopt her combat dog, Rex, after both are injured, but dealing with both human and canine PTSD. And there are many more. This is just a smattering of 3 different types of films that I recommend that address the issues of PTSD. And now we have a very unique film, Sheepdog, and that's thanks to writer, director, and actor STEVEN GRAYHM. Sheepdog is the story of decorated U.S. Army combat veteran Calvin Cole, who is played by Stephen, and he is court-ordered into treatment and into the care of a VA trauma therapist in training. Things become even more complicated when Calvin's father-in-law, a retired Vietnam veteran, incredibly played by Vondie Curtis Hall, shows up on his doorstep having just been released from prison. As Calvin's plan to run from his past becomes even more challenging, he learns through the support of his community, tough love and compassion, that he must put himself back together again for his family and for himself. As I said, the film is written and directed by STEVEN GRAYHM, and it stars Emmy nominee Vondie Curtis Hall, Academy Award nominee Virginia Madsen in one of the best performances of her career, Tony nominee Lily Cooper, Dominic Famusa, Matt Dallas. It's an amazing cast. Now, as you're going to hear in this exclusive interview, Stephen discusses the film, and it's an emotional powerhouse about PTSD. And it features authentic portrayals, and it's filled with hope. The film explores the impact of PTSD over time, with characters from different eras, and focusing on the importance of seeking help. Stephen emphasized, his refinement process. This has been in the works for 14 years, people. 14 years. To cull it down into what you're going to see on screen. There's an intimate cinematic style and an amazing collaboration with his cinematographer, Evans Brown, which he goes into great detail about. Interesting is that in Sheepdog, he also highlights the diverse treatment methods for PTSD, including EMDR and art therapy, as well as what's called tapping, which is something that many of us may do unconsciously, just in our everyday lives. There's also, he discussed the synergistic, cohesive, meticulous editing and sound design works as a triumvirate with the visuals. Those 3 disciplines are just, you can't have one without the other in telling this particular story. They are just locked together like with an umbilical cord, so to speak. The film has been very successful on the festival circuit, and the feedback has been amazing because of the impactful storytelling. And by the way, the film is in theaters this Friday, the 16th. See it, see it, see it. It's also a holiday weekend. If you have forgotten, because Monday the 19th is Martin Luther King Day. So it's a long weekend. So you got 3 days that you can go see it. Interestingly, what's most interesting from the get-go is the film's title of Sheepdog. Sheepdog itself signals what Stephen's intent of this film is. Drawn from Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman's book On Combat. That's the name of the book, On Combat. The metaphor divides the world into sheep, wolves, and sheepdogs, those who run toward danger to protect others. But as you'll hear Stephen explain, many veterans discover that when the uniform comes off, the wolf follows them home in the form of guilt, memory, isolation, and unresolved trauma. This film is about that unseen battle and about post-traumatic growth rather than combat heroics. The genesis of the project was unexpected. I love to ask filmmakers, where were they reading the back of a cereal box over breakfast in the morning, or looking at their phone and suddenly got an idea? Hey, I think I'll make a film about World War II. Some of the greatest ideas come from those unexpected places, and that's exactly what happened with Sheepdog. And you're about to hear Steven talk about this. Back in 2011, his car broke down during a solo drive from Vancouver to LA. The tow truck driver who picked him up, who was recently out of the military, started randomly talking to Steven, talking about his marriage, his kids, financial strain, and the medications to try and keep him balanced that resulted from his time in the service. Now, what struck Steven most was not the content of the confessional, but the context. The driver repeatedly told him he'd never shared these things with his wife or his therapist, and it was in that moment that Steven knew. Being able to share your stories like that with a complete stranger that would listen without prejudice, that would be the crux of his film. So yes, that encounter became the emotional seed of Sheepdog. Later that summer, Steven and actor Matt Dallas traveled across the country, and Matt plays, Steven's character is Calvin Cole. Matt Dallas plays Calvin's best friend and brother-in-arms, Daryl, and his performance is absolutely amazing. But Steven and Matt traveled across the country, sitting with veterans and their families, and they learned that the tow truck driver's story was far from unique. These conversations, which were held at kitchen tables, with wives and kids nearby, that really reshaped Steven's understanding of PTSD as not just an individual burden, but a communal one. It affects the whole family. The film's ensemble structure grew directly from that realization. Steven did immense research in here. It was not an abstract phase, but an ongoing immersion. He volunteered at the Detroit VA Medical Center, observing and participating in treatments that included EMDR, prolonged exposure therapy, art therapy, and tapping. He describes undergoing an early, rudimentary version of EMDR himself and witnessing its effectiveness firsthand. To hear him talk about it is incredible. So I can't wait for you to hear the excitement and the import in his voice as he does. Now, the first draft was nearly 187 pages. We're in Gone with the Wind territory there. And the first draft included full deployment sequences, which would be flashbacks going back to Calvin and Daryl being sent off to battle. But over 14 years, Steven treated the screenplay as a living document, expanding through research, then relentlessly distilling it down to 90 pages. Like a good bottle of whiskey, as he describes it. Working with cinematographer Evans Brown, wow. The visual grammar is classic and unobtrusive. It's designed to earn the audience's trust. Of course, with Steven in 80% or more of the scenes in the film, Evans became Steven's last point of contact before stepping in front of the camera, and was his eyes and ears behind the lens when Steven was on camera. It's a very, very codependent relationship between Steven and Evans in the making of Sheepdog. Now, interesting is Steven's approach to the film in post-production, viewing the visuals, editing, and sound as a single organism. Editor Brent McReynolds helped, quote-unquote, find the film, while the sound design was orchestrated with, as he describes it, surgical care, knowing when to let silence breathe And this is one of the things that I truly admire sonically about this film. And it just feeds into the emotional layers. Silence. Steven is a director who appreciates silence. And there is a time and place for it, and he knows how to use that with Sheepdog. And he also knows when music can deepen the connection rather than soften it. Beautiful scoring from composers Gary Rugala and Ricky Rook. As I said, this is an emotional powerhouse. It's an outstanding film. This is a very insightful interview with a passionate and dedicated filmmaker. So take a listen as writer, director, and actor Steven Grayham discusses Sheepdog. Hi, Steven.
Hello, how are you?
Very happy to be speaking with you today about Sheepdog.
Well, lucky me.
It is lucky you. Steven.
It is. You're darn right.
I am beyond impressed with this film. It is an emotional powerhouse, and I love the authenticity, the truth, the humanity, and the approach that you take with this film, because I have been covering PTSD films for a number of years. It's very dear to my heart, based on a lot of veterans that I've known, a good portion going back to the Vietnam War. And to see somebody actually give us a film with hope is, in this situation, is rare. So I applaud you for that, and I so appreciate that, because you lay this all out. We see both sides of the coin. We see what happens when you don't reach out for help. We see what happens when help is there for you. And we see what happens when you take that helping hand and the hope that it brings. So I just applaud you for this one, Steven. It's wonderful.
Wow. Thank you so much. And coming from somebody that has, like yourself, that has experience in this space means the world to me, and I know to our cast and to our team. You know, it was very important that in the research and development that I did, to be careful of inventing too much and trying to be too clever, and really just doing what storytellers should do, which is to hold the mirror up as to the world as we see it. And I wanted this to, as you know, post-traumatic stress, it comes in different variations and different forms, and in a film like ours, I wanted the experience for the audience to be unique in so much that we pick up, a decade after Calvin's last deployment, and there's so much life that's been lived in that time, and I just hadn't seen a film do that, and I thought it was important to at least make that attempt.
And I'm so glad that you did, because it's something that people don't see and they don't hear about. And even if they know people, veterans who have come back and who are suffering, they don't necessarily understand why. And you show us that here. And something that you do with the structure and in telling this story is Vondie Curtis Hall and bringing in his character, who is from the Vietnam era. So it's like help has not been there. It wasn't there then. And now we have guys 10 years after their last deployment into the Middle East are still facing the same kind of challenges. And you don't see the outstretched hands there. So I love that we get two different voices there, generational voices. Of course, Vondie's character of Whitney St. Germain, he's got something else happening in there, which sheds another light on the VA system. So you bring in so much here, Steven. How did you even sit down to juggle and structure this film to include the generational aspect with the character of Whitney, with the medical, the psychiatric aspect with Dr. Knox, and I have to say it's one of Virginia Madsen's best performances ever. And of course, your performance, as well as Matt Dallas with Daryl, you've got kids involved, you have ex-wives involved. Where do you, as a filmmaker and a writer, even start to break this down into something cogent?
Yeah, it's wild because it took years. It really did to refine the story. And I think that, like, as long as I was receptive and open that the script was a living and breathing thing, I'd be okay. You know, the first draft was, 187 pages, and I think it was 2012. There were military deployments that I had written in to show the audience, what Daryl and Calvin had been through. It was only in the year before going to camera that we were short on the budget that I cut those deployments out because we weren't going to have the money to shoot them.
Right. But
the gift that it gave me was that it informed so much of our performances and as if we had been living with that ourselves as portraying the characters. It's interesting because I always saw Sheepdog as an ensemble piece that, I'd always seen in the research I would do. I wasn't just sitting at a table with a veteran. I was sitting oftentimes at their dining table with their family in the other room, or I was really able to really soak up the entire experience of the ripple effect of it's not just how trauma impacts this one individual, it's also the ripple effect of how it impacts the families and the communities and what it takes to come together. So to answer your question, over the years, I was able to really distill it like a fine whiskey and get down to refining that story. When we went to camera, the script was under 90 pages.
Wow.
I was really judicious about what I was going to cut, knowing we had little money to tell the story, and making sure it was a complete story.
Wow. Curious, what was, because you have been on this journey for so many years, what was that mustard seed that sprouted this entire story? Was there one single thing that it's not the kind of story that the average filmmaker or writer sits down and says, I'm going to tell this story. What was that kernel that spoke to you and made you say?
The kernel was in 2011. I was shooting a movie up in Vancouver, Canada, and I had just wrapped on it. And so I was driving through the night back from Vancouver to home in Los Angeles, so it's like a 24-hour drive straight through. And 20 hours into that drive, I was like 3-4 hours north of LA, and my car broke down. So I called AAA, and they, called the local tow truck driver to come out. Guy picks me up. And during that 3-hour drive, he began to open up about, the troubles that he had in his marriage and the challenges of being a father of 3, financial hardship. And then he began to open up about the various medications that he was on that were tethered to his military service. He had just gotten out just a few years prior, and he was really struggling. And, throughout that conversation, he kept, he would stop himself and say, I can't believe I'm telling you this. I've never told my wife this. I've never told the therapist this. And when I got back to LA at the end of that ride, I looked into his eyes, and I was pretty certain that, like, we were never going to see each other again. And there was comfort in that for him. And that was the seminal moment of being able to share your stories like that with a complete stranger that would listen without prejudice, and the power of that. And I thought, okay, well, there must be more men and women like this tow truck driver. And it was that summer that I set out on a nationwide road trip with Matt Dallas to uncover that truth. And sure enough, we found out very quickly that indeed the tow truck driver was not alone in his experience. And the question was, what were we going to do as artists or storytellers to bring that to light for all of us? And that was how we embarked upon the journey, never knowing it was going to take 14 years to the screen.
funny how that
Yeah,
works.
I mean, if you were to ask Matt probably thought it was like, just my first draft of the script, he was just so over the moon about it. I think it's just being done, that it was like, Ben Affleck and Matt Damon or something like that. Like, we're going to go out, we're going to make this movie, it's going to be, and it was very, 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 not much. It was not that experience. We fought for years, and a lot of great things came out of that, which was the story got more and more refined, and as I said, as we got older as actors in real life, so did our characters. Was it always your plan to star as Calvin Cole and direct it? No, I was pretty open. I mean, because for me, it was, I love to act, and I've been fortunate to have, a pretty good career, and it definitely was my first love, but I love to storytell, and no, I never would have gotten in the way of that. However, I did feel it was really important that whoever was going to play Calvin wasn't just going to spend a few weeks with the material and then show up on set, because it was important to me after all those years to show an audience what I knew it to be, what I knew it looked like, rather than an actor come in and take a shot at it of what they think it looks like. And that's why it was really important with Matt Dallas going on that road trip with me. There was nobody else that was going to play my best friend in this film, because Matt had seen it. He had sat beside me in many of those interviews over the years and witnessed it firsthand, and that's why his performance is so nuanced. I mean, Vondie Curtis Hall is of the Vietnam era. I mean, he knows what it's like to have friends not come home, or have friends come home from Vietnam that had post-traumatic stress, and one recently who's battling cancer from Agent Orange, Virginia Madsen's a Gold Star family member. She knows what it's like to feel loss within the military community. Yeah. So, in honesty, it was lightning in a bottle, and this film could never have happened at any other time. So it's frustrating as the hard-fought journey has been, and oftentimes heartbreaking, disappointing. I've definitely come to terms and made peace with the fact that it happened when it needed to happen, and when it was supposed to happen, and thus we have this beautiful film that we hope can change and will change, lives, as we've seen on the festival circuit. Talking about Virginia, as I said, I think this is one of the best performances of her career. Her character of Dr. Knox is so important, and the fact that you are showing treatment, you address the fact, and you touched on it already, the poor tow truck driver and the meds he was on and all of this. And for years, that's always been the traditional, well, we'll just throw meds at somebody. But here, you get into some really interesting treatment methods with the light, with the tactile touch and tapping. How much research did you do into the types of treatment that are now being offered to these veterans? Sure. So I was very fortunate. Again, I was able to volunteer at the Detroit VA Medical Center, where I underwent, it's EMDR is one of the therapies you're talking about with the lights. I underwent, a more crude version of it, which is just with a wand, before they had this sort of more modern instrumentation that they use now. And it was a very effective, as I witnessed, I sat in on sessions, many of them with veterans, and I thought it was important to show that, because there are so many different therapies and methodologies, anything as simple as like yoga to, as we show in the film, art therapy, to something much more sort of out there like ketamine treatments. And so I just wanted to show what I was exposed to and what I thought in a responsible way as a storyteller I could share with an audience that could benefit them, knowing that these are tried and true. So, when Calvin is in one of his first therapy sessions is talking into a tape recorder, that's prolonged exposure. That was one of the first therapies that I was exposed to. Of course, as I said, art therapy, EMDR, tapping. tapping was something that was actually taught to me very early in my research. That was a very simple technique, and I thought it was important to show that, like, look, there are medications out there, and I'm not a doctor, so I don't advocate one way or another, but there are medications obviously that are very effective that are helping many folks out there, and there are also many treatments that don't require pharmaceuticals,
right.
or use both. And I thought it was just important to show the full scope of care that is out there that can be helpful.
And that's one of the things that really impresses me about this film, Stephen, that you do go that extra mile and show that. Now, I've got to talk to you about the cinematic aspect of Sheepdog. Your work with Evans Brown, I love the visual grammar that the two of you have developed here. The entire film is very intimate, it's very personal. But what I found really striking visually is that the deeper we go with Calvin into not just his treatment, but in dealing with life, the closer the camera gets. You really use the camera to bring us in, and you focus a lot on the face and the eyes, and not just of Calvin, but of Daryl, but of Dr. Knox. You see almost Virginia's eyes. You see her almost pleading. Trust me. Trust me. The work, you will come through this. Talk to me about working with Evans and developing that visual grammar, because that is everything from a cinematic standpoint here.
Well, let me tell you first, and I appreciate you acknowledging that, because it's very astute of you to pick up on that. Before I get into the aesthetics of the film, performance-wise, as the writer, director, actor, Evans was the last person I typically communicated with before I stepped in front of the camera.
Mm-hmm.
And what was interesting about our dynamic, because Evans, has been in the business a long time.
Yeah.
He's very seasoned. His temperament, he's like Gandalf, and wise, and he's soft-spoken, and he's empathetic, and he gets it, and he can move very quickly through a space to light it from years of being a gaffer for 20 years.
Yeah.
And I had to address that first, because I'm telling you right now, all the years I spent in the community, those final moments before you step in front of a camera can literally affect everything, no matter how talented your cast is when you were playing that main character and you're the director. And it was that level of support that I got from him in those critical moments before stepping in front of the camera that really set the tone for what I was able to do and how free and honest I was able to be as an actor. Now, that said, the aesthetic, I said to Evans, I don't want to shoot this handheld, and he agreed. I said I wanted the audience to trust us. I don't want to play any tricks with the cameras, is Calvin having an episode or something, or is it, this kind of thing with, that you kind of see on some of the procedural stuff on television. Right. And I said, listen, I want this to be shot like a classic film. It's all behind the eyes. It's not just what the characters say, it's what they don't say. It's in the ambient shifts in the score, the soundscape. It's in the lived-in locations. There's no film sets. Those are all practical locations. And I said, everything needs to be authentic. And if one thing is out of whack, like you try to do some fancy camera angle off a crane or whatever, the audience is out of it. I said, so let's just keep it simple. I gave him references like, for me, this is like The Deer Hunter meets Manchester by the Sea meets Good Will Hunting meets Coming Home. And all those films have a very similar aesthetic. They're very filmic. And even the aspect ratio being 185, that puts the audience in the story with us. Yeah. Rather than looking at it, letterboxed at 240 and kind of being, I wanted the audience to feel like one of the characters in the film. So yeah, and then as you said, as we get further into the story, it becomes more and more personal. And you start there's less cussing in it. There's closer, tighter angles.
Mm-hmm.
It's putting you closer and closer and closer to the story as it unfolds.
Well, if we only have time for one more, I have to ask you about working with your editor, with Brent, the pacing and how you reveal things and not reveal them, such as episodes with Daryl, such as an incident that involves Calvin's daughter, without giving away spoilers here. But working with Brent, how challenging was this editing process?
Oh my God, I mean, Brent's greatest gift that he gave me was his grace and patience. He really allowed me to explore the film, and he was just a tremendous editor. I mean, he understood, like, as they say, you try it to deny it, meaning if you can see it and you see it doesn't work, then you can remove it and you can make your peace with it. We had a longer version of the film, and we had tested it for audiences, and the feedback was just so positive. But we knew, Brent and I knew, we needed to cut for pacing probably another 10 minutes from the film. And so we were frustrated. You're getting this great feedback, people, really responsive to the movie, but we were trying to figure out where's the cut. And there was this scene that is in the opening of the film that's not there anymore, where it's Calvin and Daryl standing at Calvin's truck.
Mm-hmm.
And it was an important scene. It's in the opening. The moment I cut that, it unlocked all the other cuts in the movie that needed to happen because it dictated the pacing. We removed that out. Then we were able to put the opening titles over those drone shots.
Mm-hmm.
Gorgeous song by Jackson Dean, Wings, that makes you feel like you know Calvin, that you can feel that you haven't even met him yet. He hasn't even spoken a line of dialogue yet. So that's the level of detail that went into the editing process, and I could never have done it without Brent's masterful help.
It's beautifully cut, and dare I even say, I have to say, hand in hand with that, with the edit, is your sound design and your use of silence. You have some of the most powerful moments where no one is speaking, or we hear a voice not on camera speaking. And it adds so much more depth and internalizes Calvin's pain and his growth to come out of this. Just on every level, Stephen. Excellent job. So well done.
I so appreciate you saying that, because all of that was meticulous, like truly, especially in that sound design of knowing where we could pull back score and allow the silence to permeate in those ambient shifts, and then knowing where you needed, for instance, like when Calvin's cutting Whitney's hair, and, I'd spent so much time in Detroit, so I was very influenced by Motown, and I thought that would be an interesting layer in there while they're having this, fellowship sort of moment together as friends. So, yeah, I thank you for saying that, because, again, it's the benefits of being the writer-director, is that it lives in your mind's eye for so many years, and so even when you try something and it doesn't work, tonally what needs to come out of it, so you're able to be malleable and let's try this, or let's, So thank you for that, because if you gave me $10 million today to recreate that film, I would never take your money, because it was lightning in a bottle. And my God, were we all, especially including myself, just lucky to be a part of it, and lucky that these folks trusted us to tell their stories.
Well, as I said, it's an emotional powerhouse. It is very thoughtful. It is profound. And I can't wait for everybody to get to see this film, Stephen.
Thank you so much. I sincerely appreciate your kind words and your support, and helping us to shine a light on the message of the film, and getting folks out to the theater to see it. So thank you.
Oh, thank you, Stephen. And I can't wait to see what you bring me next. And I hope we get to chat again in the future.
I hope so too. Thank you. I'll be on the edge of my seat.
Well, it just means you have to get back to work so that we can.
I do, yeah.
Stephen, thank you. And you have a wonderful holiday season.
You too. Thank you so much.
And that was Stephen Graham talking about Sheepdog. Do not miss this film, people. It opens in theaters across the country this Friday, January 16th. I encourage you to go see it. It is eye-opening. It is heartfelt. And it will give you a new perspective on what veterans do go through when they're grappling with returning to society and quote-unquote an everyday life. Because nothing is everyday about it when you are suffering with PTSD and trying to assimilate. So, that is all the time we have today. I'm trying to keep the shows a little shorter, at least for a little while, and not bombard you with 90-minute shows right now. So, that is all the time we have today. Tune in again next week when I'm talking with filmmakers out of Dances with Films New York. Yes, 2 Dances with Films now. There's one in New York and there's one in LA. Same festival, 2 locations. The LA festival is later this year. But I've already spoken with a couple of filmmakers about one of the films that has its world premiere on the 18th at DWF. And that film is Roof. So if you're in the New York area, please go get me to a Ticketmaster or wherever you get tickets for Dances with Films. Go to the Dances with Films website. Roof is amazing. It stars Bella Heathcote and Asif Ali. I love this film. Takes place on a roof over a hot 4-day 4th of July weekend. And you got 2 people, one of who's a pregnant lady, stuck on the roof. Let your mind go crazy with that. But yeah, if you're in New York and you can get to Dances with Films and see Roof, see it. And I'll also be speaking with, on next week's show, we're going to Stop Time and director Paul Schwartz. So, and I think Stop Time is screening on Saturday the 17th. So check out Dances with Films. If you're in New York, check out some of the films in person. But then next Monday, I'm going to be talking with some of those filmmakers. So make sure you tune in again next Monday. And plus, it's a holiday, so you have nothing better to do than to just listen to me prattle. So until then, I'm Debbie Elias. This is Behind the Lens.